So I know some of my videos were pretty long, and here's another long one. Today we're heading from Loughrea to Kilkenny, and we're in search for some relatives, and this was a really fun day. We lost the other vehicle within seconds of leaving the hotel, so we just followed the GPS. And sorry about the raindrops on the camera there, but this little archway here, we just stopped by because it looked really cool. Well, it ended up that that was the road that we were supposed to take. We were supposed to drive through that archway, which didn't even look like a real road. It was so small. But we had a great time, and we randomly ran across things that were just interesting. This is Birr, and there was this huge castle, so we stopped. We were thinking about actually touring it, but then we were like, okay, that's going to take too long to actually get us to Kilkenny, since the rest of them were all meeting up with us there. But we had a great time that day, just kind of randomly exploring places along the way. And then in Kilkenny, we got into our hotel and did a little research and discussion, because this is the day we're going to search for our relatives. So here's Jerry checking out the map, planning our route. First place that we headed was Gowran, and in Gowran was Lachlan Pub. You can see right there. It wasn't open at the time, and across the street is this. This is actually the owner's house. It's not a bed and breakfast or anything. It almost looked like a little hotel, but it's actually just the owner's house of that pub. We'll be back there later today. So we went up the street to Arkle Bar, and this gentleman in the background talking to Jerry was really helpful in explaining how to get to Castlewarren, where we know some relatives are from, and suggesting that we go to Paulston as we are on our way. So you see some of the brothers and sisters there. Here we are in Paulston. Jerry's talking to some gentlemen that know the area pretty well, giving us suggestions of how to best get to Castlewarren, giving us some information about the area and some history. We worked our way to Castlewarren and found it as a very remote little tiny town. I would say even smaller than Imogene. The whole area has about, I think they said 40 homes, but not right there in the town. As we were there, we wanted to stop by the church, and at the church they were doing some construction work, so there were some people there that were very helpful. Let us check out the graveyard right next to the church. We could not go into the church, it was locked up, but we found a couple gravestones that had Lachlan names on it, and hopefully with Mom's help she can trace back some history. So in just a little bit you'll see us walking into the gravesite, and hopefully if Mom listens to me read the gravestones, that'll get some of her Ancestry.com juices flowing there. But you can see some of these outer buildings, just a very small town, but really interesting buildings. Is it? Praises for the soul of Margaret Laughlin, alias Cahill, beloved wife of Michael Laughlin, who died April 26, 1904, aged 82 years. It says erected by Michael Laughlin of Castlewarren in memory of his father Martin Laughlin, who died August 15, 1833, aged 40 years, and his mother Margaret Laughlin, who died January 17, 1878, aged 86, and his daughter Margaret, who died July 9, 1868, aged 15 years. So hopefully that gives a little bit of information on that first one. Coming up next, you'll see Rita checking out the family tree that Mom printed out for us, trying to figure out what everything means. And then we did find another Lachlan gravestone coming up here. Now the gentleman you're going to see there talking to Jerry, he was working in the graveyard. His name was Tom, and he actually invited Jerry into his house, and Rita came along with them as we were exploring the little area and gave tons of information.
Yeah. What's the last name? It's Lachlan.
What's that?
That's, see, Pierce there.
Yeah.
Pierce.
Pierce.
They're
Give that to Jerry, read it.
That probably won't come up much online.
In loving memory of James Laughlin, died April 23rd, 1954. His wife Mary died 20th June 1984, aged 100 years. His brothers Patrick Laughlin died April 11th, 1965, aged 81 years. And Michael Laughlin died November 20th, 1969, aged 88 years. The only thing we could really come up with was that there was maybe a great-grandnephew of one of our relatives that still lived there, and an area of where we thought the farmstead maybe was when some of our relatives were there. So this is what I'm showing. It's a gorgeous place. This is one of my favorite views of Ireland. You can see the mountains in the background, the vista off in the background. This is actually Tom's house, and then coming up here is just an abandoned house. If you look up in that window, there were mattresses and furniture. Looks like somebody just left that house. And a little bit down the street, you're going to see the house that we think maybe some of our relatives lived either in or right next to. This house seems a little bit really well upkept, but this is where that great-grandnephew's living. And right next to it on the left side, it's covered up by quite a few things, but we're wondering if maybe that's where the old homestead might have been.
In that brick part.
After we left Castle Warren and doing some exploring, there were so many cool buildings that we passed by on the way up there. So this building's not in Castle Warren itself, but it was on the drive up there. And it looks like a house, again, that was abandoned. Just very interesting and nice outer buildings. Just curious as to what this would have been in the time that someone lived there. With some of the help from the local people, we headed back into Paulston, and they had suggested that we check out the old cemetery next to the church. So we did find one Laughlin tombstone right at the front there. Erected by Elizabeth Laughlin of Bornafea in memory of her beloved husband, James Laughlin, who died this life August 16th, 1879, aged 65 years. When we passed through Gowran, we saw this beautiful structure, so we stopped, and it actually was the St. Mary's Church. It was a huge building, and you could go in and explore it without having to have any payment to go through. But this area that I'm walking into now is what Patty believes maybe was at first the church, and then when it was destroyed, the more modern church that they still use is to the left side. By the time we made it back to Gowran, the Laughlin pub was open, so we had a few drinks there in honor of our name, of course. And then we headed back into Kilkenny and headed into the nightlife. So you'll see some Irish dancers coming up that we saw at the bar. And tomorrow we're heading back to Dublin for our final night.